Barry Robinson, tells a story. Once upon a time, he says, there were two old men who had lived together for many years. Someone at first service asked me if I was talking about Carl and me. This is a story that was told by Barry Robinson, an author. There were two old men who had lived together for many years, and in all the time, they had never quarreled. They had never fought. They had never so much as had a disagreement. So one day, one of them said, "Do you suppose we should try to have a quarrel at least once to see what it feels like?" "Well, perhaps," the other one said, "but I don't really know how a quarrel happens." "Look," said the other, "I take a brick and I put it between us, and I say, 'This is mine,' and then you say, 'No, this is mine.' So they placed the brick between them, and one of them said, 'This is mine.' And the other one said, 'No, it's mine.' So the other one said, 'Okay, it's yours.'" And so they went away, unable to fight with one another, and they never thought about trying it again. What in the end do we really own? Is it something uniquely ours that we have to fight over it, or is it something that we recognize that we came into this world sharing a part of and knowing that sometimes we have to pass it on? In both of our readings today, you hear sources of expressions that are no doubt familiar. In Ecclesiastes, you hear, "Vanity of vanities, all is vanity." And we all know, "Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you may be dead," which is actually what happened to the man who said it in Jesus' parable of the rich man in the Gospel of Luke. If nothing else, you can go home today grateful to learn that "eat, drink, and merry" is actually from the Bible. Just remember that he who said it died a few hours later. Both the writer of Ecclesiastes, which reports to be the aging King Solomon, and the man in Jesus' parable have drawn different conclusions about life and their life's work, but both have forgotten what the point of our work on earth is in the first place. This old teacher in Ecclesiastes is bitter. "Vanity of vanities," says the teacher, "vanity of vanities, all is vanity. I, the teacher, when I was king over Israel and Jerusalem, applied my mind to seek and to search out by wisdom, my wisdom, all that is done under heaven. It is an unhappy business that God has given to human beings to be busy with. I saw all the deeds that are done under the sun, and see, all is vanity, like chasing after the wind. I hated all of my toil, in which I toiled under the sun, seeking that I must leave it to those who come after me, and who knows whether they're going to be wise or they're going to be foolish. Yet they will be master of all for which I toiled, and all of which I used my own wisdom under the sun. This also is vanity. So I turned and I gave my heart up in despair concerning all the toil of my labors under the sun, because sometimes one who has toiled with wisdom and knowledge and skill must leave all to be enjoyed by another who did not toil for it. It's just not fair." And then the rich man in the parable of Luke is predictably smart about his work. He said, "I will do this. I will pull down my barns, and I will build larger ones, and there I will store up all of my grains and all of my goods, and I will say to my soul, 'Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, and be merry.'" These two scriptures have two different viewpoints, that they arise from believing that what we're spending our lives doing somehow ultimately belongs to us. Bernard Brandon Scott is a well-known scholar. He visited us from the Jesus Seminar a few years ago. And in his book, Hear Then the Parable, he says that this is not one of Jesus' more radical parables. It's a parable that builds heavily on the tradition that has been in Israel for many generations. The tradition taught that land, meaning everything around us, does not belong to us. In fact, it is the sole property of the Creator, and our work on earth is to manage it for all. And that is part of a tradition that is something that over the centuries we have moved further and away from understanding, although it is a biblical concept. We have come to assume that the things that we possess are ours, and hence it's a source of many of our problems. On some level, this ancient and biblical tradition must ring true for us, because how did we ever come up with the concept of bankruptcy laws? The notion that old debts can be wiped clean and a new slate started if we're somehow not in tune with the biblical idea of Jubilee, which is that time every 50 years when imbalances got corrected, when debts were forgiven, when slaves were set free. That's where we got our bankruptcy laws understanding from. And it certainly goes hand in hand. How has our idea of ownership or entitlement changed since then? Jesus tells a story with parallels in common lore and deep connections to the wisdom traditions of his own people, wherein a miraculous harvest is mismanaged because a man is out of communion both with his neighbors and with God. The story and the tradition out of which it comes is a radical statement about the ownership of property. It says that prosperity is given to some, the top, smaller number, smaller percentage, only so that some may benefit. But what's supposed to happen is that all may benefit. And from Jesus' point of view, and no doubt from that of a good number of his listeners, the rich man has one fault, and it's a big one. He begins to believe that the blessings he has been given are only his blessings. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, and be merry. In fact, the point of our work and the time we spend bumping up against one another in this and every lifetime is the hope that what we ultimately do enriches the creation that we have been set down in. Placed here to love, placed here to nurture, placed here to feed, and to feel the effects of the goodness of other human beings and the social orders they have already created, and to leave this earthly realm a little bit better than when we found it. What the aging King Solomon, or maybe he was a bitter teacher whose identity we do not know, is doing is to focus on the fact that he has been working, and for what? He seems to expect a good measure of recognition and reward for his work. He wants something tangible in return. It seems impossible that given his despair that he could have thought for a moment that his reward was simply moving forward the human condition and making this place just a little bit better for his children and his children's children and those to come. Barry Robinson says, it's interesting and quite frankly insightful that Luke sets this story in a context where Jesus is approached by someone who is concerned about a family inheritance and how it's going to be divided up, one who wants to make sure that he gets his fair share. Is there anyone out there who does not know the story about what happens when people set out to make sure that they get what they rightfully believe is theirs? How many family squabbles, how many broken relationships, how many terrible hurts have been caused by that family argument? And all because we begin to assume that what is essentially a gift is something that is ours without reference to anyone else, without regard for human need. What is essentially wrong with a brother demanding that his brother divide the family inheritance with him? Ask the men, then ask the women. There's another way, and it's the only way by which both creation and God are honored, and it's to recognize that there is no more mine or yours, any more than there is just you or just me. You know, we're all in this thing together. And if we're ever to hope to survive as a species, if we're ever hope to learn to what it truly means to belong to each other, then it will happen not by seeing how much we continue to store up for ourselves and ourselves alone, but how we need to distribute our abundance in this world, which we have been blessed, to those who have less. In his book, Wishful Thinking, Frederick Buechner writes, "People are free in this world to live for themselves alone, if they want to, and let the rest go hang. And they are free to live for themselves and accumulate the dismal consequences as long as they can stand it." He says, "The doctrine of hell proclaims that they retain the same freedom in whatever world comes next, and thus the possibility of making damned fools of ourselves would appear limitless." And if that sounds radical, then you're hearing the scriptures very clearly today. Because in the domain of God as it is described to us, both the one that is now and, if we believe it, the one that is to come, there are no arguments over what belongs to whom. Once upon a time, two old friends tried to argue over a brick. But they found it just didn't matter. And that's how they lived happily ever after. Amen. Let's rise and sing our closing Alleluia.